Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Veritas podcast. I'm very excited to be sitting down with Mack today. This is the second time I've had her on my channel. She just goes by Kenziepuff in some spaces online. If you want to hear more from Mack after today's show, go ahead and check out her YouTube channel. That's Mack and Liberty. There's going to be a link to that in the description below. Just to give you a little bit of background on her, she's a cosplayer, she's an anarcho-capitalist, and she's kind of a libertarian commentator. That's a combo that you don't encounter a lot, so I'm always very excited to talk to her. But without further ado, Mack, thanks for coming on to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. This is the rebooted version of my show. It's more or less the same show, but it's the Veritas podcast now. You'll be the first guest for the Veritas podcast. And in that tradition, let's jump into it with just a little bit of an intro on you. Since I've had you on the channel before, we'll just kind of keep it relatively brief, and I'll refer people who are really interested in kind of you and your background to your channel and all the content you've created. And then also the previous interview that we did on the channel, which I'll link in the description below as well. But with that, just let the audience know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I actually finally have a video up on my channel as well, talking about how I came to libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism in my journey. So we're probably not going to go over that here. So if anybody wants to know how I got here, there's a complete video on my channel of that as well, finally. So people were asking for it for years. So just briefly, I got into libertarianism and cosplay pretty much around the same time, completely unrelated at that point, probably around end of 2015, beginning of 2016, which, as you know, because of what happened in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump, was an insane year to start to get into politics. So probably 2015, I started getting into libertarianism. I started out in Young Americans for Liberty at my college and joined through there, and was pretty centrist and apathetic about politics, and just started looking into anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism a lot more, and started commenting on it online, and grew a little bit of a following, and here we are.
Yeah, and you're also into cosplay and anime, as I recall. I say recall because my introduction to you came from Twitter, and I know, unfortunately, and I did want to talk about this, you were banned from Twitter, and I want to talk about tech censorship and social media. And I want to just address that off the bat. How has that experience been for you? How are you dealing with it as a content creator and somebody who I know had your largest following on Twitter? As I recall, you had in between 20 and 25,000 followers. Tell me just about that experience. I actually haven't had someone on the show before who's been banned from a platform. I've had people who've been suspended, but you're the first person I've talked to that got kicked off, got the not the Twitter jail, but kind of the Twitter death penalty, it sounds like. Although hopefully maybe something can happen on appeal, but I know hopes probably aren't super high. Just talk about that for a minute and kind of how you're dealing with it as a creator, as an online personality.
Yeah, so about actually 3 months ago, almost exactly now, I was on Twitter, and all of a sudden my Twitter wouldn't load, and I thought, it's happened. It's finally happened. I kept my Twitter pretty kosher, we'll just put it that way. Of course, some people think my opinions are radical, but I tried to not cuss overtly, say any, no words.
I'll say that I was surprised you were banned in particular. I didn't think that you would be banned.
Yeah, a lot of, and actually there were a few other people that were banned at the same time I was, that I thought, why are we banned? This is insane. It was very strange. I've been telling all my friends, I'm like, listen, they're going to get us all. So don't bother. I told my husband, I said, they better hope they don't let me back on, because if they do, I know there's no point now in censoring myself or trying to keep it kosher or clean, because they're going to ban you anyway. So, well, sure enough, actually yesterday, my appeal came back. Of course I appealed it. I know.
It's worth it to try.
It's pretty useless, but I do know actually a creator, Brittany Venti. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She makes a lot of commentary channel, and we're not in the same circles, but she's a pretty big creator online, and she appealed, and she actually got her Twitter back. So I guess I didn't get mine back because I'm white. I don't know, because she's made the joke that the little bit of ethnic that I have in me must have got them to get it back, but I didn't have I could have pulled the woman card.
I was going to say, you're a woman, so you've got like a slight advantage, but not enough.
What's crazy though is, so the reason, and actually I won't go into it a super amount, because I also have a video on my channel, because everyone's like, what happened? Why did they ban you? What was the tweet? But there was no tweet. I got banned for officially the email spam and platform manipulation. Now, what's funny about that is, I mean, some people might not realize this, but I've had the Kenziepuff Twitter account I had since 2009.
You were an early
It was
adopter.
my account in high school. I had to delete a lot of old cringy tweets of like song lyrics and stuff, actually, when I started to get really, get a following and the snowball effect was happening. But so, and I've always used photos of myself online. I've never been like an anime profile picture and anonymous, or as anonymous as you can be on the internet person. I've always posted cosplay pictures and, selfies and all sorts of stuff. So I thought, okay, well, I have seen people, as weird as it is, people do this, use my cosplay photos as profile pictures. So maybe there's a chance that they think I'm impersonating myself because I don't have a blue check mark. They shut down the system for applying for one. I've tried to apply for one before just because people do use my photos sometimes.
And now they just give them to people. They
now they
bequeath them
just
to people.
they hand them out even to people with like 800 followers.
If you're a journalist, it's like you got it. You're like a journalist at a newspaper with 4 readers.
If you run for any kind of political office and apply for it, they give it to you, no matter if it's like local district or whatever, which I'm not interested in. So unfortunately, I never got one. But yeah, and my appeal just came back yesterday. And what's weird is they basically said the same thing. They said, you violated our spam and platform manipulation things. I read the platform manipulation. It basically, they can ban you for whatever they want.
Oh, yeah.
What it is.
And that's all of the big tech companies at this point. Because it is, I'm not entirely sure how you could have been doing that. I mean, the theory you pose where they think you might have been impersonating yourself is interesting.
Yeah.
Because sometimes these do end up being errors, although it's extremely questionable.
Now, one of the things I will say that was listed on their platform manipulation was spamming like self-promotional material, which I did have a pinned tweet with like my Ko-fi link, my donation platform and stuff like that, along with all of my other social media.
Isn't that a pretty common practice though?
But exactly, everyone does that. But yeah. I guess, and I wasn't the kind of person, since that was my pinned tweet, I never would constantly say, hey, donate to this, donate to that. I would mention my Ko-fi, but I would never push it with the link because I don't know if people know this, but I'm kind of into like social media marketing and stuff. Twitter does not like links to other websites. If you post a YouTube link, and even if it's verified,
they always butcher them. They butcher
they deboost them, which is stupid. But I kind of see where they're coming from because they want to keep you on their site. But at the same time, if they want advertisers, you would think, but of course they want you to pay money to boost your tweets. And so I kind of get why they do it. But like you said, that's a super common practice. People link to their PayPals and in their bios, all sorts of stuff to other websites, whatever. So that's a possibility, though. Technically, they could say, well, you were just doing that too much, which would be asinine. Of course, anybody that followed me knows I didn't push that link constantly like some people do. And every like cosplay post, here's my donation link, here's this. That's not the kind of content creator I was. So it's just kind of there. Some people are probably like, you have a donation link? Like, I don't post that all the time because I just do this for fun. So, but yeah, that's a possibility. But they told me no. Bad. Whatever I did was bad. They said I don't have the email, but basically they told me there were multiple violations of this spam and platform manipulation. And no, they didn't give me any examples. Now,
had you received any kind of warning leading up to this?
I have. So since 2009, I have been banned from Twitter twice. Now, one of those, it was kind of I deserve to be banned. Personally, okay, I just said that Redditors should be thrown from helicopters.
Which is a joke.
In Minecraft.
Yeah.
I meant it in Minecraft. But I didn't say in Minecraft. It was clearly a joke. I had actually, the day before, said that people who use as a mother as an excuse that they're all-knowing should also be thrown from them. That didn't get me banned. But apparently Twitter really likes Redditors.
Out of curiosity,
really mad.
What year was that? Like, I'm wondering on the timeline of how much they've cracked down.
That was probably like I would say 2017. Probably roughly 2017.
So they were sort of starting to rev
right after
up.
The election. Yeah. Probably whereabouts. And then a little bit after that, Twitter started to do their bi-monthly, it seems like, comb of fake accounts. And my account was actually, I would probably have like 11 or 12,000 followers, I want to say at that point. And I actually got hit in a spam bot ban. And my Twitter was banned for spam before, but I appealed, and 2 days later they got back to me. I did a CAPTCHA and everything to prove I was not a bot.
Okay.
And they let me immediately back into my account. So when it happened this time, I thought, oh, well, I'll just appeal. Well, it took them 3 months. And this time they must have taken a look at my profile and said, no, we're not letting this person back on.
Yeah. I think there's a different set of rules for kind of orthodox thinkers versus heterodox thinkers. Because it's funny, because you and I, our political background isn't all that similar, but we both fall into the general bucket of like not woke, just not, woke orthodox, if you will. So my understanding is that you had one account at one point that was banned, and then you created this new account. And then there was the one issue with the spam thing, but then that was appealed. And then now that same account that was successfully recovered from that appeal was permanently banned.
Oh, no, I've always had the same Twitter account.
Oh, so when you were banned the first time, was it like a temporary suspension?
Yeah. So the spam where they took it down, that was my 2009 created account. And they let me back in, and they unsuspended it. Because it was like this, it was completely suspended. I couldn't get into it. My account was in, because here's what's funny about Twitter, and my husband pointed this out, I've never thought about it. If you go to _Kenziepuff on Twitter, I'm still there. It just says suspended. So your account isn't gone. So that's how they boost their user numbers. Well, probably almost half, probably more, are just suspended accounts, and people just kept making new ones. But the account's still there. But no, the spam where I got back in and they let me back in, that was actually this same account. So that's why this time on this account, when I originally was suspended, I thought, oh, they probably just caught me as a spam bot again. For whatever reason, my account seems to get flagged every couple of years, it seems like. So whatever, they might let me back in. But after a month, I started to go, uh-oh, I don't think they're gonna let me back into my account. So, but I don't have a Twitter account. Everybody's been asking me, are you gonna come back? Like, you could come back as an anonymous Twitter and like change your handle. It's too much of a hassle. Honestly, Twitter was taking up too much of my time. Everybody knows. And if anybody subscribes to my YouTube channel, they'll see I was not consistently uploading content. I would say I would make a video. This is the most terrible pitch for my own channel. But because I was spending all my time on Twitter, which I was growing my following and getting ideas out there. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there is a point where it becomes too much and you're just there for the dopamine. So I took this as a sign. I said, I'll focus on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel has been growing more recently because I'm, actually uploading every once in a while. And I'll just focus on that. And I launched a website. So if I get banned from YouTube and stuff, everything will be there. I'm slowly going to start blogging and stuff. And I just figured it's just not worth it. So no, I don't have a secret. I'm not floating around. I do manage some social media pages for people, but it's not like always in the libertarian sphere. It's just for fun. I'm not like trolling people on other people's social media accounts. But yeah, I have no idea. I wrong think, I guess. And I hate doing that because I don't think I'm important enough to, they're silencing me. I hate that. I could have milked that a lot, I think. But the reality is, yes, I'm more right wing. So yes, I'm going to be censored.
It can happen to any of us at any time. Unfortunately, it seems like the bar. I mean, even at one point, I remember Brett Weinstein's Facebook account was terminated. I'm like, Brett Weinstein is the most like inoffensive of like all the people.
So easygoing. Every podcast I've ever heard the dude on, he's just like, let's just talk. Like he's not an aggressive person.
Like a Bernie bro guy, like not even really on the right in any meaningful way. Right. And I can really relate to what you said though about, because one of my questions was going to be like, has there been a positive aspect to this insofar that I recently had to set a limit across all my devices. I use an extension for Chrome that limits me to an hour on Twitter across all my devices per day.
Oh, that's cool.
And I don't think I was going that far over an hour. Usually I was maybe going in between like 1 and 2 hours, but even just getting back like 30 to 45 minutes of my life each day, I think is good. Because my thing was doing this show, I feel like I want to be on Twitter just to kind of have eyes on a little bit of what's going on with the people I follow, having stuff to talk about, being able to just communicate with people through the DMs if their DMs are open, to get guests and things like that. But I don't need more than an hour a day to do that. And also personally, it's like if I knew I was spending more than an hour per day on Twitter, I'd be like, no, an hour is the absolute most anyone should spend on Twitter per day.
It's a total time vacuum if you let it.
Do you
and
feel
I mean,
good about it in some ways, insofar that you're getting time and energy back? Like, is there kind of a positive aspect to it?
I hate, and I don't want this to sound like a cope, because like, yes, I miss my Twitter. It was awesome. The thing I will say is I don't miss it as much as I thought I would, because in the Twitter ban, a lot of people that I was always like, a lot of people that had followed me for years also got banned. So I was like, oh, I could make another Twitter, but why? All my friends are getting banned. It's only a matter of time before it's so hard to keep up with people, because now you have to change your handle or they'll get you again. I'm like, I'm not going to rebrand my entire Twitter and everything just to make another Twitter, just to maybe get half the followers that I had.
Get banned again.
Get banned again. I mean, I know people, I think, was it Battle Beagle? He's like on his like
12th account or something.
5th or 6th at least account, which like good for him. He's one of those people who can retain his audience. I had that Twitter since 2009. It wasn't because I built a brand. It's just because I've been around for so long that it was just there. I just didn't want to put in the work. That sounds really bad, but I had other platforms. My Facebook page has 27,000. My cosplay page has like 27,000 followers, so I can still get out my cosplay that way. And I have a Facebook page that's separate from my politics that's got like 6,000, I think, almost 7,000. So it's like, I'm not on the internet now. And the one thing that is very weird, though, I will say that I miss as well, is I did not realize, which is actually kind of scary now that I think about it, I was getting basically all of my news from Twitter because I was on it all the time. And now something will happen. My husband mentioned something, some football thing that happened, NFL. And I go, no, I didn't hear about that. I don't have a Twitter. You got to tell me these things. I didn't hear about that. Because I mean, on my Facebook, I don't really look, there's not really, I think there's a news tab for Facebook, but I don't look at it.
Twitter is, I think, probably the #1 source for news by a significant margin at this point, and including for myself. I can relate to that and how it feels kind of weird. It's funny because like anytime I mention that to somebody over the age of like 30 or definitely 35, they're like, oh, okay, you get all your news from Twitter. And it's like me and everyone else my age. It's like, it's not necessarily a terrible source. I'm very selective with who I follow. I only follow about 200 people on Twitter. I won't follow someone. If I see that like more than half of the things that somebody posts are just upsetting me, like I don't follow that person. I don't do hate follows or anything like that.
Oh my gosh, you're a normal, well-rounded individual. If you don't like things people
I don't do hate follows. I don't argue with people on Twitter. I actually anyone who follows me on Twitter, my Twitter handle will be in the description. I don't post a ton on there. I want to grow my following on there, but that's really the only thing I could ever think of that I want to do with Twitter is communicate about what I'm doing here on YouTube and with the podcast. But I want to ask you, considering all that's been going on in this sphere, what would you, and now you're somebody who's been, personally targeted, what would you want to see happen as it pertains to the censorship of heterodox voices online? Because it does threaten to just kind of close off any valve for resistance to orthodoxy, to dogma, to what we're constantly kind of having shoved down our throats. It doesn't really have a name. It's the woke, the whatever it is, the statist thing. The resistance to that, insofar that it exists mostly online. And I think a lot of that has to do with anonymity being a thing online, with things like Patreon being a thing online, and with social media, people being able to get thoughts out there, again, anonymously or in a way that is building them an audience that they can use to supplement their income if they get fired. Like every time I post, I'm like, I might get fired from my job if they discover it, but hopefully at that point I'll have built enough of an audience that I could maybe just go, okay, let me go all in. But in any case, what are some of the things you'd like to see happen? I feel like we might differ a little because you're coming from the more kind of libertarian, I'm assuming, and I don't want to put words in your mouth,
maybe
but I'm assuming more free market. Yeah, but maybe not. What would you kind of want to see happen as it pertains to this issue?
Yeah, I actually think libertarians have a huge blind spot when it comes to social media censorship. So we actually might agree more than you think. And this has been an opinion that I've developed even before I was banned. So I don't want anyone to think, oh, well, she's banned now, so of course. No, I've actually, I would say I've tweeted about this. You can go look, but I've talked about this for a long time. I've talked about it on live streams before. People have been asking me this. Obviously, this has been going on for years now. It obviously picked up in 2016, which seems a little weird, but whatever. That's a different topic. But I think libertarians have a huge blind spot when it comes to social media censorship. Of course, they always say, well, social media or censorship is the government censoring you. I don't think libertarians, to be quite honest, have looked into who is behind these social media companies. This isn't some conspiracy. This isn't, the government is subsidizing in a lot of cases, Facebook, Twitter. There is government collusion with censoring people on social media. Absolutely. The government's using social media to look at DMs and track people down, commit crimes, but the government has also allowed these. We all watched the panel of Zuckerberg and everyone in Congress, and Jack, the CEO of Twitter, in Congress. We've all seen them on Joe Rogan talking about they're being subsidized by the government. They are not private companies. They're benefiting from the label of private companies, but I think purposefully over the years, the decades, what a private company actually is has been so bastardized, and it's so easy to say, oh, well, the free market. We don't have a free market, first of all. To call what we have a free market, of course people think you're idiots if you say you're libertarian, if this is what a free market is. This sucks. Everyone knows this sucks. Libertarians, conservatives, and leftists all knows whatever we have right now, it's not working for anybody. Now, the solutions are all different with those three cases, in many cases, and with many things. But I think libertarians need to realize, I don't know what this, and I think libertarians and conservatives, this is why they get along so well a lot of the time, some of them, because they're so stuck on, well, I'm principled. The left isn't principled, but I'm moral and I'm good and I'm doing what's right. Okay, that's why you're losing. The left doesn't care. Leftists don't care. Oh, they said something different 5 seconds ago, and now they're saying something else to you, straight to your face. Yeah, that's what they do. They don't care. I'm not endorsing that. I'm not saying we should lie to people and do bad things, but I'm just saying there's a certain point where you have to decide, do you want to be principled or do you want to live your life?
Yeah, the way I would describe it is you have to learn to wield power in a way that, yeah, at the end of the day, it will be based in principles that are better and more true and better for society and better for the individual. But you still have to wield power in a way that is going to be aggressive and perhaps similar to the way that the left uses power at times as a cudgel. And so what I'm curious about, and what you said before about the government collusion thing, I'm not as well versed in it, but one thing that I do know, having formerly worked for the Democratic Party, is that many Democratic Party hacks are on the boards of and in senior positions at Twitter, Facebook, Google, et cetera. To the point where I remember the woman who emailed Brett Weinstein, like we talked about earlier, when he lost his Facebook account, he looked her up and learned that she had worked in like the Obama administration or something, the DNC, something like that, and was a pretty high ranking official. So there is this weird relationship between particularly the Democratic Party, obviously not the Republican Party, of course not, particularly the Democratic Party and these companies. But I'm curious, based on what you're saying, are you open to, say there was a Republican or a libertarian who wanted to address this issue legislatively with and this is the word that for me, I assume is like a trigger word to anyone that's like an ANCAP, with a regulation? Are you open to a regulation on these companies?
I think we wouldn't necessarily. I think there's kind of two camps. One says, well, the government's already colluding with social media companies, so it's not really doing anything worse to go in and regulate them with the government. The government, they're already in bed with the government, so using the government to do that, that's just what you have to do. The other camp is basically what these platforms are doing is they're calling themselves public spaces and saying, oh, we're not publishers, we just put things out there. But when you get into the nitty gritty, no, they are. They're just benefiting from a loophole, essentially. So I don't think closing a loophole that's allowing people to censor people necessarily is unlibertarian or unprincipled. I also think, like I said, at a certain point you have to do something. I think. I mean, I think that's what the
That,
point of libertarianism is.
yeah.
Like, what are you doing if you're going to sit by, let people silence you? And I've seen this again with the Modelo thing going on right now. I don't know if we can say that word on YouTube, but the pandemic, we'll say that. With air quotes. I've seen libertarians also drive me crazy when it comes to that, screeching they're private businesses. They can do what they want. Okay, yeah, the airlines and all these businesses are private businesses, and they all want you to have a vaccine passport. Okay, you're just cool with that? And they're being subsidized and encouraged by the government to do that. And you're just going to let them because technically they're private businesses.
What you're saying is reminding me of this. I think it really speaks to the sentiment of a particularly spicy meme that I very much enjoyed. I saw it's like the Gadsden flag, right, with the snake, and it's like for government fascism, and it's like libertarian / conservative, and it's like don't tread on me, and then it's like for corporate fascism, and it's got like a BDSM gag ball in its mouth, and it's please tread on me, and it's like
with all the social media labels on it.
It's a great meme. I don't know how to tell people to go find it. I'm sure you could find it if you just look up like Gadsden flag meme or whatever.
It's pretty popular,
it's something that's frustrated me. I mean, I'm kind of in a space where I don't have to be as conflicted just because I don't even say liberal anymore, but just for the purpose of this conversation, I'll say liberal, because I'm not inherently opposed to, nor have I ever been, government solutions to certain social problems. Although I am not a fan of identity politics and certain elements of government overreach. But I mean, there, as I understand it, with libertarianism, the idea is how small can we make the government? But that still leaves some room for like a small government still has to do stuff. And that list of things they have to do might include keeping these massive corporations who are in bed with the government anyway, like you said, from destroying discourse. Because the thing that what you said about like, we have to do something eventually, that's a thought that reverberates in my brain with this issue every time it comes up. Because what I try to explain to people is this is one of the most existential threats to our country and particularly to our discourse, because like the place where discourse is happening it's these places. It's online. Like people aren't standing on a stump in the middle of the street and it's like, oh, well, as long as the government doesn't come pull them away, that's free speech. It's like, yeah, but like, who cares? Like they're going to talk to 10 people who are going to walk away or like, call social services because they think the person's mentally ill. Like that's like one of those two things is going to happen. So it's like, this is where discourse is happening. It's where the decisions and consensus of our society are going to come from. It's going to come, unfortunately, from social media, from the internet, sort of for better or worse. And if we allow these companies to just say, okay, there's one set of rule for one group of people and another set of rule for another group of people. Basically, it's like if heterodox thinkers and orthodox thinkers are playing football, the orthodox team gets 21 points to start the first quarter. And it's like, let's see who wins. And it's like, yeah, every once in a while when you're watching football, there's a 21-point comeback. Like probably one out of every like 30 times that a team is down by 21 points. It's like the quote unquote, and I use this language more now these days, kind of to what we were saying before about wielding power. The PR victories for heterodox thinkers are going to get rarer and rarer the more they're kind of having these opportunities to have those PR victories, which I do think are important. They're having those shut down. I always think about how, to me, the last memorable PR victory for the IDW heterodox resistance, whatever you want to call it, that I remember being like a solid thing where it was like, we won this one, was January of 2018. It was Jordan Peterson on the Kathy Newman show, where anyone that was a great thing, just because I would use that to show to people when I was trying to explain to them these thoughts that I was having in early 2018 about identity politics. I'd be like, look at this and tell me who you sympathize with. And everyone would be like, the woman is awful. Like, and, even people that I knew that were very, very far left would be like, this is awful. So yeah, I wonder about our capacity to have that kind of give and take.
Well, and what especially scares me about libertarians is, especially in the modern era where we're dealing with mask mandates and things like that. So especially now, social media has been pretty much for the past year and a half in a lot of places, not where I live, thankfully. I live in a free state, apparently, one of the few that's left. But woo, Midwest, let's go. Fly over states. But a lot of people, the only way they could communicate, even with family, was social media over the past pretty much year and a half. So it gets even scarier to think about. Now you have libertarians saying, oh, people that wear masks and all that, that's not really hurting anyone. And they're saying, oh, the social media companies are private companies, they can do what they want. And inside my brain, there's a little person screaming, trying to get out, going, what are you doing? Do you not see what's going on here? This is not good. This is the best chance in that we've had in decades to go, hey, you know all those, like the Patriot Act and all that we've been telling you is going to come back to bite you in the butt, and oh, they're spying on private citizens, they're going to try to enact all this authoritarian BS on all of us, and eventually it's going to, you know, affect your everyday life, and people called us crazy. Hello? But instead I see libertarians, not all of them, also there's people like Eric July, Tom Woods from the very beginning were saying, you know, Ron Paul, of course, saying, this is stupid, we see where this is going, and good on them. But I've seen a lot of milquetoast people, what I like to refer to as Wolberts, saying, no, it's fine, they're private companies. So you put those two things together, and you're nothing but a tool for, even if you're a minarchist or an ANCAP like myself, you're essentially a tool for the state and the woke culture that has clearly infested the state. And they're using whatever they can to silence you. And you're just kind of going, well, I mean, it's just what's going to happen, I guess. It's just so idiotic. It drives me insane.
Yeah,
So,
I think that it can be said at this point. I guess one of my litmus tests for how seriously I'm going to take someone is like, do they think that there needs to be some kind of move? Like, do they think that people should make a move to solve this problem, or they are just like, are kind of like, it'll solve itself. It's fine. It's like, no, this has got to be one of your top like 3 priorities.
Well, right, and that's the thing. You have to provide a solution. And this is something that I did. I'm certainly not, it's not like I've never done this. When I first got into libertarianism, 2015, 2016, I was one of those people that was just like, live and let live, it's fine, whatever. The drug war and stuff, guys, it's like, that is not a main issue right now. Like, it's just not in most people's lives. You know what is an issue? Being able to literally feed their family because they can't, because their entire county is shut down and they can't go anywhere. That's an issue. And instead of trying to talk to people and you have to meet people where they're at. Your average person, you ask your average person what anarcho-capitalism is, they don't know, but you can meet them where they're at and be like, oh, so you lost your job because of what's going on. Let's talk about that. Most people are pissed right now. We got to harness that and provide solutions to people. Like when you first asked me about the social media censorship, I didn't have an exact answer, but I said, well, you could go about it one of 2 ways. That starts a discussion instead of just sitting there and saying, well, yeah, I mean, we can't really do anything, can we?
You're not taking anything off the table. You're not saying I absolutely will not regulate these companies because of some dedication I have to a certain principle or whatever. It's like, and in your case, it jives with your principles because the explanation provided. But yeah, it's one, I like what you say about meeting people where they're at, because that's a really important aspect of this. I try to focus on my channel on like solutions and thinking about this as a battle to be won, or at the very least kind of a decline to be halted or reversed in our society. Right. And I always say that like free speech is actually often put in the bucket of like, nobody cares about free speech. Like people don't think about, and it's like, actually, if you frame it the right way. So if you ask someone, do you feel comfortable saying things that you truly believe about? And then you just list a few of these kind of cultural issues. So like gender identity, things like that, about the relationships between men and women, which we're going to get into in a minute, about race, about what's been happening with the police. Like, ask the average American, do you feel comfortable sharing your truest, most innermost thoughts about these issues with people you're probably fairly close with, coworkers, friends, maybe even some immediate family members? They'll say, hell no. Yep. I not in a million years will say anything close to what I believe. I won't even get within a square mile of what I believe. And I'll admit that like personally, I've reconstructed my life in the past few years so that outside of the workplace, I just say what I think. If somebody doesn't appreciate my truest, most innermost thoughts in the social sphere, they are free to not be my friend, to not be in a relationship with me, to not be, even if it's like a family member. And thankfully, I haven't had a direct family member say that they won't interact with me anymore, but it's been tough. But the one place where I do have to bite my tongue a lot is when I'm at work. I won't say where I work because I don't want to dox myself, but I work at a place where if I said exactly what I think all the time as things come up, you know, like they've been discussing police brutality for the past year or so, or police brutality.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it in air quotes, but it's, I mean, that's a whole show in and of itself, but
Yeah.
it's, if what I was saying was, if you frame this in those terms, and this is something that's very important to people, is whether or not they feel they can speak what they believe. If you put it in those terms, they'll say, yes, free speech is one of the most important issues, if not the most important issue to me, because it's also the method by which you solve any other problem. If you want to solve the war on drugs, if you want to solve what you might think is police brutality or crime or whatever it is, anything, there has to be this open conversation about it. One place where it's very difficult to have an open conversation is anything that has to do with sex or gender, and especially if the F word, feminism, is brought up. I want to ask you about this. I like talking to you about feminism because, as I recall, it's actually your thoughts on feminism was how I discovered you on Twitter, because I'm not really in like the ANCAP libertarian space or the cosplay space, but I do like a good shitting on feminism. To put it that simply, but I also want to frame this conversation insofar that I recall from our last conversation, I think this is a good point, that you don't particularly care to be described as simply an anti-feminist, because that implies that your whole ideology is based on what you're against rather than what you're for. And I would describe myself in the same way, that if I am opposed to certain talking points or certain things that bubble up in our culture as a result of modern feminism, it's because it's going against a principle that I have, like some kind of positive principle. Due process is an obvious one because of the believe all women thing. But I want to just ask you, I don't want to put too many words in your mouth, to just describe kind of your view of feminism and how it's impacting relationships between men and women in particular, kind of in modern society.
Sure. I mean, it's a big question. I think ultimately the root, which I won't describe myself as anti-feminist, because quite honestly, I think it's kind of cringy. It's a cringy way to describe yourself.
Agreed.
Also, it still associates you with those crazy people, and even if I'm against these people, I don't care. What I will describe myself as, I'm anti-egalitarian. I have no problem describing myself in that way, which that's probably changed a little bit since the last time we talked, because I think the root of the issue with feminism, the issue with a lot of cultural things that are going on right now, is the dichotomy between egalitarianism and hierarchy, which of course I think I remember you're a fan of Jordan Peterson. Mm-hmm. He's talked about this, of course. Yep. Hierarchy, at least in depth. There is a huge problem with, and this, you know, I'm Christian. You could come at the feminism thing as, well, God created man and woman, and you could go into all that. You don't need to, though. You can come at it from a completely secular perspective if you want to, because it's very obvious people are different, not just men and women. This woman and this woman, you're different. This man and this man, you're different. We all see that. We all observe it in everyday life. We're all good at different things than other people. We all have specialties that we're good at and things that we're not so good at, things that we're average at. It's very obvious. So you have to sit back and ask yourself, why then would we be subscribing to this ideology? Because that's what it is ultimately. It's not just a political thing. It's a way of life for these people. You can look at anyone that calls themselves a proud feminist. It is a way of life. I
literally call it lifestyle feminism. I have a joke that there's 4 levels of feminism, and the 3rd level I call lifestyle feminism.
It is all consuming. It becomes a personality. That's honestly why I like to bring the cosplay and hobbies in with anarcho-capitalism, because I think with anything, it can be all consuming and you can forget who you are as a person. But especially I see this with feminism. And it just comes down to the obsession with needing everything to be equal. And they'll say, to kind of bat people off that come off or that are anti-feminist, they'll say, what's wrong? We just want men and women to be equal. And sure, on its face, that sounds great. I mean, but that's
it always does with any of these things. They're
right.
Like, let me give the most nice definition of what I support. And then anything that's against that is Nazism. It's like, always.
Like, well, you know, the Patriot Act, the name of it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. It's always like, or I'm anti-fascist, like I'm pro-woman and you're anti. They always just frame it in the silliest way. And there's people who fall for that. There's people who are like, well, it says anti-fascist, so that's what it is. And it's like, I'm going to make a restaurant called The Best Restaurant. and just like see if any like, and like I'll be like, all my competitors are actually not called McDonald's, they're called Shitburger. Like you should look it up. And it's like the weirdest thing that works on people. I don't know how.
But like you said, and I think it kind of ties into what you were saying before, most people, they don't want to talk about stuff like this, period. They don't want to, and it's so funny. So I grew up being told, don't talk about politics, religion, or family feuds. I think I mentioned this the last time I was on the podcast, which is absolutely hilarious because I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I comment on politics and religion on social media. I was a comparative religion major in college. My brother's a pastor. So they really failed. They did not instill this in us. But thank God they didn't. And I mean that sincerely, because my dad, I'm going to show this to my dad and he's going to be like, I can't believe you said that. That's what's wrong with society right now. We live in a society, I know. People don't talk about those things. What? How a lot of the most fundamental things, whether you're religious or not, it is a big part or isn't a big part, it shapes your life. Okay? Politics, whether we like it or not, and I'm not a person that thinks politics is the all-knowing, all-meaning solution for things. It affects your life. You have to educate yourself on things whether you want to or not. No, I don't want to talk about feminist theory all day, but it's affecting my life. It will affect the lives of my children. It's affecting my brother, my dad, my mom. It affects everyone. You can't just, I hate this live and let live libertarian that's been attached to libertarianism so much because it's not feasible. It sounds nice. It's another one of those things. It sounds really nice, but look at what egalitarians, and I have seen people call themselves egalitarian libertarians, and it makes me want to pull all my hair out, and I have a lot of hair, so it would take a while, but there are enough people to call themselves that I would be able to do it. Seems like a bit of an oxymoron. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't make sense, especially if you're libertarian right, which I'm not even gonna, I just pretend the libertarian left doesn't exist because they really don't. But that can be a whole other conversation. There's two kinds of people. It's split into people who think that somehow everything and everyone can be equal, which there's tons of cringy young adult novels about why that doesn't work. Read them, and that's fiction. Then there's a lot of nonfiction on why that doesn't work. Suggestion would be egalitarianism as a revolt against human nature and other.
There's like the entire history of Russia for like a few decades, and like China.
Right. There's a lot of, and the root of all of those sounds really nice, just like communism on its face. People are going to take this out of context. Sounds really nice. But
communism is great. Quote. Kenziepuff.
You don't think about it. Sounds really good, but the key is you don't think about it because people are taught from a very young age not to think about these things. It just sounds good. It feels good, so I do it. It's very hedonistic. It's very mind-numbing. It doesn't mean anything. It just sounds really good. Feminism, men and women being equal, sounds really good. Then you look at feminist founders saying we need to abolish the nuclear family. This world would be a better place if men weren't in it. All sorts of things. Read The Feminine Mystique. I mean, there's feminist literature on this. It's not me being a cringy anti-feminist making these people out to be demons. They just are. I don't need to play up what they say. I've long said, when someone looks at you and tells you what they are going to do, believe them. Don't put your best interpretation on it. We've been doing that for decades, and look where we are.
Yeah.
Trying to give these people the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't work.
The thing that strikes me about what you're saying is how close to the surface it is. You don't have to dig very deep into feminist literature, feminist theory, feminist content on YouTube, Twitter, wherever, to see the overtly anti-male, anti-family, anti-femininity overtones. They're not undertones. It's not subtle. It's just like, if you take an honest look at what is being said, it's like, it's always like kind of played off. Like there was the hashtag kill all men situation where it's like, oh, well, that's a joke. And it's like, no, actually, if you look at what people are tweeting, like these are angry women that hate men. And maybe they don't want to go out stabbing men to death in the street, but they're expressing an extreme hatred for men. And the connection with egalitarianism is interesting because it seems like it's all of these ideologies, whether it's feminism or BLM or like socialism, they're all kind of fusing into this grotesque monster of like, it just kind of all falls under the woke umbrella sort of. And there isn't a good name for it, because woke is, I think at this point, becoming the new like SJW. I hate saying woke because it reminds me of saying SJW. It's like, it has the wrong connotation. Like, it's not a serious enough term. It's almost like a joke.
It's used so much too. And I mean,
Overused,
I know people don't like to say it and people like to pretend it doesn't exist. And when I say it, it's called an alt-right dog whistle, but there is a name for it. It's called cultural Marxism. It's there's books on it, entire books on it. There's entire strategies written by socialists and communists that this is exactly what they're going to do. And like I said, when people tell you what they're going to do, believe them. Even if you think it's crazy, oh, they wouldn't do that. Well, I didn't think people would burn entire city blocks down, but here we are.
Yeah, well, and if you go to like Black Lives Matter's website, I think they deleted it recently.
They did.
They edited
it.
They
changed their website.
And but at first it just said like, we want to deconstruct the nuclear family. Yes. Like, it's just right there. Like, we are trained Marxists. Yeah. And then, I don't know if you've seen the clip. I brought this up in a previous video. One of my favorite things I've ever seen in my life is one of the Black Lives Matter, like board of directors or like founders or something. She's asked about the fact that she, a cultural Marxist, communist type, owns like 3 different $7 million mansions. And her response was, I struggle to, when I quote someone, I usually try to give like the most charitable interpretation of their argument. I struggle to do that here, because literally what she said was, well, I have a family. I have a brother with disabilities. I have a family, and they're also kind of welcome in my homes. So that's kind of me serving my community. And I'm like, a lot of people have families. What the fuck are you talking about?
Actually, I just heard about this actually. She actually completely framed it as the interviewer who was asking her the question. She said, well, of course, the reason why people are saying this is because they don't like when Black women take care of their families. What?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother show, but what? So no, these people know exactly what they're doing. I'm very tired of, I used to be the person saying, oh, well, I'll just give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying you should go out and argue with all these people. I've been there on Twitter. It takes up a lot of your time. At a certain point, I just had to be like, gotta let the crazy go, get the people I can, you gotta do triage. Some of these people you can't talk to. You're never gonna change their mind. Which is another place libertarians fail a lot. They think they're going to change these people's minds. You're not. You got to focus on who you have things in common with, people that are calling themselves things like classical liberal and all this. You're not going to change the mind of somebody who calls themselves a Marxist on Twitter, who calls themselves a proud feminist woman, blah, blah, blah. You are
just
not
like if someone called
mind.
themselves a Nazi. Like, there are certain things where if somebody's going to describe themselves that way, they are quite deep into those ideological weeds. I mean, I want to ask you, it's almost hard to talk about feminism specifically. I think it's no wonder that we kind of got into other topics because, and this was part of what I wanted to ask you about it. It seems like it's been in and of itself, like if you isolate feminism, it's waned in influence in the past, like 3 years or so in particular. And my general theory is that it really exploded circa like 2015 and then especially 16, because Trump was kind of used as a foil because there were all the sexual assault allegations against him, the pussy tape, all of that good stuff. And but then, and it kind of, I guess it kind of went until there was like the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, which were the best like display of just like, this is how this can really impact society in a negative way. Like the due process just not being there, being able to just take any man and put him through hell and back over something that almost certainly did not happen. Like, to be frank, if you actually look at the evidence. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think about, or why do you think feminism seems to in and of itself kind of stopped being such a big part of the conversation and waned in influence? On one hand, it seems like maybe it's just kind of like there's a stock market of different identity groups and it goes up and down. There's peaks and valleys. No, it's like black is up, trans is up, woman is up. And
hop on this.
Yeah, exactly.
Where we're at right now.
And then there was the Asian thing for like a minute. There was like a little spike for Asian, and then that goes away for a reason that could be a whole nother podcast. But I wanted to ask you about like what you think of that, because it's hard to discuss feminism because what exactly is going on with feminism isn't clear. I mean, the trans thing has gotten very weird because feminism is being expanded to men, to biological men. But just what do you think of kind of this peak and valley situation we're in? Do you think that feminism might come back in the near future, or do you think that it's morphed into something else?
I think I think I think feminism as a term conveniently, like you said, flows in and out of popular culture, but I do think it's always there. And I don't want to say, no, I'm going to say it.
Please do.
I think to a certain extent, myself included, not as much anymore, but definitely when I was younger, whether you identified or were in politics or not, feminism as an ideology, not necessarily the term, was a part of the way that you think. If you went, and I went to private school, I was not a public school person. I went to private school. I went to private Christian school, mind you. And then I went to two public colleges and a private Christian college, still there. I think it's just ingrained in society because of decades and decades of indoctrination, essentially. And this is why education will always be one of my biggest things that I will always talk about. And even in men, it's not just women. I'm just talking about women from my perspective. Boys are taught that they're defective girls from the moment they enter school, even in Christian schools. My husband also went to private school. They are not immune. That's why when people say, oh, well, public school is bad. If you put your child in private school, they'll be safe. No, they won't. Someone else is teaching your children with probably books that had to be government approved still. So they're using the same textbooks. So they might teach creationism at some school, but that's really maybe an Old Testament and New Testament class here or there. You're getting the same stuff. And I think that's why it seems like it kind of gets really popular, you know, with Gamergate and stuff and harassment online. And then it goes down again. And then the Kavanaugh hearing and the feminists are all loud again. The loudmouth feminists don't go away, but neither does the ideology of feminism. And like
it's kind of always there is what I think that's a good way to put it. It's always there, but whether or not it's like you're actually being subjected to like the BuzzFeed videos might change.
So, and like you said, it's hard to talk about just feminism because there's so many other things. And that's why I say I have no problem calling myself anti-egalitarian, because that is the thread holding all of these movements together. BLM, the feminist movement from the very beginning. I am not one of those people who's like, first wave was cool, second wave and third wave bad. From the very beginning, suffragettes burned down private property. Do not get me started. That's what it was. It had a really nice face on it. That's what it's always been. BLM, people want to talk about the movement versus the organization. Yeah, it sounds really nice, but look at what it is. I mean, no offense, they essentially, for all intents and purposes, endorsed Joe Biden, and they're already starting. They already said people in their administration, oh, Kamala was on the campaign trail proudly saying she smoked marijuana to be hip with the kids. And then they told everyone in their staff, if you smoke marijuana, you got to get out of our staff where we can't hire you. Like, it from the very beginning, you're endorsing people who claim to, and that's the other problem. The other issue is the people in power, they might use egalitarianism to get you on the train, to elect them, or to support their power. But once they get up there, and this is why I'm an anarcho-capitalist, they are full on hierarchy. That's why
they just want oligarchy. They're just
like,
all right,
socialism and communism, a lot of times you end up with a dictator. Why? Because they like stuff. I mean, everybody likes stuff. Everybody wants to have their own stuff. And when you get them that enough power, that's what you do. It's human nature at that point. So that's why like you said, it's hard to talk about just feminism. There's all these things that it seems like the label, like people's Twitter bios that are part of the woke culture are getting longer and longer, like pro trans, pro BLM, pro stop Asian hate, pro feminist.
Usually empath is in there. Like it's the LGBTQ. When I graduated college, it was LGBT. When I went into college, it was LGBT. When I graduated from college, it was LGBTQIA plus, and now it's longer. Like I saw it recently, and I was like, oh, they did more. Like it was already hilarious. Now. Like it was already very funny how long it was, and then they're doing it more. Yeah, it's
a lot.
Yeah, and it does create this marketplace for politicians to pander to whichever. Again, it's like the stock goes up, the stock goes down, and I guess what we saw with the Kavanaugh hearing in particular was like somebody sense that like, I'm going to buy feminism on the kind of like identity marketplace. And they made, well, I mean, I get, it's interesting. It's so interesting that he actually was confirmed. I feel like there's a different timeline where he wasn't confirmed. And I wonder what the impact of that would have been. Because that to me, that there was a wane in feminism's influence when it suffered this, I don't know whether to call it a pseudo victory or a pseudo defeat. That it was kind of a weird situation where they didn't block his nomination, and yet what they did sort of make very concrete in our society the whole believe all women thing. Because I was able to, before the Kavanaugh situation, have conversations with my friends who were Democrats. And I actually was a Democrat at the time. That was the last straw, what made me unregister. And that situation was where it was brought to my attention how easily you could just take a batshit idea like believe all women and just make everyone in a particular political party just believe it instantly by just saying like, this is the line. Like we're handing out scripts to people in the mail and this is what it says. It's sort of like, it's weird because it's like people receive these PR notes from the party, even when they're just a typical person that you or me might be having a conversation with. And they just, and it was something that 5 minutes ago, they didn't necessarily believe 100%. And we saw that with abolish the police, defund the police. Like literally the day before the video of George Floyd came out, people would have been like, that sounds fucking crazy. Like abolish the police sounds like a batshit insane idea.
They wouldn't even think about saying it.
They'd be like, what? Are you speaking English? Like what abolish? Like what does that even mean? And then like the next day they got like the memo and they were like, okay, yeah. Like I remember literally seeing a post on Facebook from a friend of mine where he was like, I too thought that the term abolish the police sounded ridiculous, but then I educated myself and here's a source from, Occupy Democrats or whatever.
I love that line. It's always, I educated myself, and then they'll throw it back at you and they'll be like, you need to educate yourself.
I know. You need to be like me.
I'm like, you mean read the pamphlet that you were handed? Because that's essentially what you're doing.
It's like, right. It's like, I have the plug in the back of my head. I have another one here if you want it. Like it's, it's
Join
like,
us.
it's so, that was the funny, I remember showing that to so many people just being like, I love the fact that he typed out, like, I too thought that this obviously insane thing was insane. But then I read a bunch of propaganda that says that it's not and believed it was not. Like after reading that, after getting a text from the party, like after getting a message from the party saying, believe this thing or else, I was like, yes, please, daddy. Like it was just so, it's just crazy the whiplash you'll get. But I know you only have about an hour. Before we sign off, it was great speaking to you, but I want to give you an opportunity to just, I think you talked about your platforms a little bit more. I know, unfortunately, no longer Twitter, but just one last time, if you want to let people know where they can find you and hear more from you.
Yeah, so I know my Mack and Liberty YouTube channel will be down in the description. If you want to see all my other social media and what I've got going on, I actually launched a website. It's just kenziepuff.com, super simple. You can head there, and my Instagram and all my Facebook pages and everything is linked there actually. But I look forward to seeing you guys. And hopefully, actually, I quit my job. So in a good way, not a bad way, voluntarily. So hopefully I'll be producing a lot more cosplay content, video content for YouTube and stuff like that. And I also just posted my first blog post about my physical removal from Twitter on my website. So I'll be blogging on my website as well. So you guys can hear from me that way too.
All right, great. Well, thanks again for coming on, Mack. Check out all of Mack's platforms. And if you're listening to this show on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps get the show out to more people. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Veritas podcast. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all next time.